thank you for being here. I didn't know you were so hot-headed.
Jessica brings out the best.
You're getting ready to eat some hot dogs tomorrow.
Well, let's hope, right? And thank you to each of you, and thank you to all those American patriots that made 1776 possible and give us our freedom to celebrate tomorrow.
Absolutely. I say it all the time. We are the land of the free because we're the home of the brave.
Well said.
That's right. I hear a woo. You know what that means? That means Harris Faulkner. Take it away.
Patriotic, we are ready. Fox News alert. President Trump now is ramping up his criticism of Democrats after calls by some liberal lawmakers to do away with ICE, abolish it. We go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. The president has unleashed a series of tweets today on the issue of immigration, calling Democrats, quote, weak on the border and on crime, and accusing them of demeaning law enforcement. In one post, the president said, quote, many Democrats are deeply concerned about the fact that their leadership wants to denounce and abandon the great men and women of ICE, thereby declaring war on law and order. These people will be voting for Republicans in November and in many cases joining the Republican Party. That from the president. Earlier today, the ranking Democrat on Senate Foreign Relations, Senator Bob Menendez, was asked whether Democrats' calls to abolish ICE were hurting his party. The senator dodged the question and lashed out at the president. Watch.
What's harmful is the president's policy that is both, I think, as the courts have dictated, illegal and immoral. The America I know doesn't tear children apart from their mothers. The America that I know doesn't detain children in cages.
Joining me now, Mercedes Schlapp, White House Director of Strategic Communications, the perfect person to talk to on this fine day. Thank you for being with the program. Great to see you.
Good afternoon. Great to see you, too.
Some of the words by Democrats, you just heard Bob Menendez of New Jersey, have been pretty tough. They've been saying that ICE has been used as, quote, a deportation force and must either be scrapped or revamped. And what is the word from the White House?
Right. And then you had Senator Durbin say that ICE was incompetent. These are the men and women in law enforcement who are basically there in the front lines of making sure that they're protecting our American communities. Every day, these men and women are fighting to keep us safe. And so we need to come up with the right answer here. Are the Democrats standing for open borders and crime? Or are they going to stand for security? And are they going to stand for our borders? As we know, what's happened with ICE is that they're the ones that are being demonized. And what these individuals are doing is that there are so many stories out there of ICE agents saving a 6-year-old, for example, from the hands of a smuggler, where, for example, they are detaining these criminal aliens, hundreds of thousands of them in just 1 year. And these are individuals who have committed crimes, whether it be drug offense, dangerous drug offenses, assault offenses as well, homicides. And then ICE is also on the front line of fighting against these MS-13 gang members, where they've arrested over 5,000 of these individuals who are part of gang activity, many of them that threaten immigrant communities every day.
Yeah. We saw some law enforcement leadership in the state of Maryland saying that without ICE, how difficult it would be to fight, for example, MS-13. So the president wants to see something done on immigration. The timeline may change for that, but this is something that's been important to him. You're going to need Democrats to do that. Does it make sense to take a look at ICE, where you might be able to reform some things and make it better and quiet down this conversation about abolishing it?
No, I mean, absolutely not. What ICE needs is they need more resources. What our border agents also need are the resources. This is what the Department of Homeland Security has been asking for, and what the Democrats have deprived these men and women for their ability to do their work. Look, there is no question, Harris, that there is a crisis on the border. And the reality is that we're in a situation right now where, for example, you have 10,000 of these 12,000 unaccompanied minors who are being taken care of by Health and Human Services, who these parents have chosen to leave them here in our country. In many cases, it's the dangerous trek, it's the smugglers, the human traffickers who are bringing these individuals over. And if they're crossing illegally, then of course there is the fact that they would be prosecuted of a crime. There's legal ways that individuals can seek asylum and come through the ports of entry. What we're saying right now is that we need to make sure that we close the legal loopholes, that we end catch and release, because otherwise what happens is that these individuals simply come into our country, country, 20 days later are then just released into our communities, and that is incredibly problematic.
We're familiar very well with what's happening with these children, and you know, we were talking about on the couch a little earlier on Outnumbered about the optics of all of this and how the Obama administration made some of the same calculations that this administration has had to make, just with different actions. So they may have looked at something like zero tolerance and said, well, there's going to be backlash from this. This White House moved forward, this administration, and did what it said it needed to do. Looking back, though, would you have done it differently? And moving forward, you still have to deal with the children in this process. What does that look like immediately?
Looking back and looking forward, what we need is legislation. We need a legislative fix. The president came to the table, asked the Democrats to come along, come up with what we consider these 4 pillars that Democrats should agree with, which is that of ensuring that we close our legal loopholes, that of ensuring, for example, there was a DACA component to it where DACA recipients would have a pathway to citizenship. This package that the president pushed forward since last October has been one that a vast majority of Americans agree with, because we need to find that compromise. But we also need to ensure that we close those legal loopholes, ensure that we're able to swiftly detain and remove individuals who are coming here, criminal aliens who are coming here illegally, and be able to send them back to their countries. There is a legal way to come to this country, and that's what we need to do. Enforce our laws, which is what President Trump has promised to do and will continue to do. With that being said, our hands are tied until the Democrats take action. And what we're seeing right now is that the Democrats are on the side of open borders. We're on the side of protecting Americans.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, and I'll move on after this. You created, or at least pointed out, a place where Dems and Republicans could maybe come together. How about come up with something on that 20 days? That 20-day deadline. How about just work on that part first, since that immediately affects the families? I'm just spitting it out there. Let's move on. Let's talk about U.S. Supreme Court picks and the president moving very swiftly on talking with candidates. What is the latest?
Well, the president met with 4 of these potential Supreme Court nominees. As we know, the president's been very transparent in this process. He's seeking someone with great intellect, with the right judicial temperament, who is going to uphold the Constitution. I think that obviously he provided that list during the campaign, and we know exactly where he's headed, where his mind is on this.
So reports now, and maybe I can confirm this with you, that he's talked with at least 5-6 people, 4 of them yesterday, potentially 2 more today. What are some of the things that the president's asking? And we can get to Roe versus Wade and all of that in a minute. But specifically, aside from all of that, what is he looking for?
Well, I'm not going to get into the private conversations, but clearly what the president is looking for is for the individual who's going to be the one with great intellect, with the judicial temperament that we're looking for. Obviously, he's talked about the importance of making sure that they uphold the Constitution. You know, I think that that's very critical. I think one important point when the media starts asking about specific court cases and what one judge would do or what other nominee would do, we go back to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg laid out the Ginsburg rule back in 1993, basically saying, look, the judges shouldn't have to come up, there's going to be hypotheticals, there's going to be rulings. We shouldn't ask the judges about that. At the same time, we want a judge who's going to be an independent thinker. And that's what the president's going to be looking for. Yeah,
quoting the notorious RBG. Right there with Ginsburg and her rule. And it's interesting, too, because people do evolve. I mean, you're putting human beings on a court. Yes, they may be of one mindset or another about certain issues, but what you're pointing out is that people do evolve in all of this. The timetable is really swift with this president, and he's not looking back, apparently, at what others have done in terms of arguing against what you can and cannot do before the midterm elections. Just to settle that issue, how realistic do you think it is that the president will look at this and say, I'm going to name somebody and there could be an appointment before November?
Yes, well, the president's expecting this vacancy to be filled immediately. I think when you look back at for example, Elena Kagan in 2010, they pushed through that confirmation hearing in 3 months before the midterm elections. I mean, clearly we don't want politics to play a role in this. We want to make sure that we get the hearing that this Supreme Court justice nominee should have, and fill this vacancy immediately. I mean, I think we want to just move the politics away from this and just make sure that this Supreme Court nominee has a fair hearing, and that's what we'll be asking for. And actually, we've seen polling where the majority of Americans have said, let's fill this vacancy before the midterm elections.
All right, real quickly, Roe versus Wade, how does it figure in?
Well, again, as the president has mentioned, he's not asking the Supreme Court justice, these potential nominees, on specifics. And I think we're going to stay clear as to what the president has been looking for, which is that, again, of the right judicial temperament and someone who's going to uphold the Constitution.
All right. The Trump administration, it's being written today, was dealt quite a blow over its detention of some asylum seekers as people coming into our country seeking political asylum or from torture or from other reasons. The ruling was that you cannot detain them for an indefinite period of time. What is the White House's response to this? Again,
Department of Justice is reviewing the case, and we're not going to get ahead of the DOJ review. What we do know is that our ability to that in any way that weakens our borders, weakens our ability to manage our borders or defend our borders, it's just not productive for us. And so we want to make sure that we stay away from weakening our borders, which again, in essence, weakens our communities.
All right, real quickly, and we managed our time well enough to have just a tiny bit of time left over.
I must be talking very fast.
I know. I want to get to the economy because it's been something that the president has been talking a lot about, and we've got numbers coming out. We've reached the beginning of a new month, and I want to just give you just a moment just to put a button on the recent economic news.
Well, I mean, clearly for President Trump, this has been one of his top priorities, which is that of ensuring that we have a booming economy. I mean, we're seeing something that's so incredibly unprecedented, where you have consumer confidence, small business confidence levels at an all-time high. You see Hispanic and African-American unemployment very low. I mean, at an all-time low as well. What you are seeing is the fact that we have so many more of these job openings and those individuals seeking jobs. Now it's a matter of ensuring that we invest in our workforce. We want to make sure that we continue this boom. And that comes because when you have the 6-month anniversary that we just celebrated on tax cut, the signing of the tax cut law, as well as the deregulation, putting those two buckets together, I mean, it's clearly what we're seeing is a positive and booming effect on our communities.
You talk about that investment in worker, that kind of has filled in a question that we can leave for another day, but I'm always wondering how you then match up those jobs to those people, because there is a gap now in skills too, and you hinted at it with the investment in workers. Mercedes Schlapp, Strategic Communications from the White House. We appreciate you taking my battery of questions today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harris.
Well, for a reaction now, let's bring in Democrat Congressman Mark Vesey of Texas, member of the new Democrat coalition. My family's down in Texas. I'm always down there. Good to have you today. You heard a lot coming from the White House there. It's transparency on this issue of immigration. It's tough, and you've got to find some compromise, if you will. I suggested maybe coming up with something about that 20-day that directly impacts children, making sure that you don't reach that 20-day point and you're just putting them out in the country. What do you think about that?
I think that anything would be an improvement over what the president is doing right now, which is purposely separating children from their mothers, from their families, as a way to deter people from coming to the United States. It's a policy that I think it obviously embarrassed them because they changed it. And we need to obviously, as a Congress, work together to pass long-term comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, your family will tell you here in Texas that the economy here is doing really good. A lot of employers here are having a hard time finding employees to work certain jobs. And the people that you see coming from Central America, the people that you see coming from Mexico, they're coming here to fill vital jobs here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. In labor that is sorely needed, badly needed.
So can I just step in for a second? Because I hear you saying that, and I've heard this argument,
right.
They don't have to come here illegally to fill those jobs, though, Congressman. There's another way to come in.
You're right.
It doesn't have to be illegal. That is a personal choice. That is not just because there's a magnet over here with jobs that you can't fill in Texas. That is a personal choice to come to try to fill those jobs illegally. Not everybody makes that choice.
There are jobs all over the country. You talk to farmers in Wisconsin.
Yeah, but you don't have to enter illegally to take those jobs.
Don't want these jobs. That's why you need to pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill. If you really want to secure the borders, if you really want to stop the flow of immigration into this country and be able to control it properly, then put together a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Stop letting the House Freedom Caucus and the extremes in the Republican Party control the immigration debate. Democrats and Republican people from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and, again, liberal groups all agree we need a comprehensive bill.
Everybody agrees with that. The president wants to sign a comprehensive immigration bill. No one is saying that that isn't the goal. My point is, can you accomplish some small things on your way to get there? Now, the president has talked about wall building and money for that. You had that back in 2006 under a different president. So we know that we can have a conversation where you can come to the middle and allocate some funding for building a wall. And in those areas where you can't physically put a determined fence line or a hard wall, you shore up the number of Border Patrol. I mean, there's a way to get there and then mix in trying to deal with the situation with the families. There's got to be a way to get there. I mean, do you really want to get there, or do you just want to be on opposite sides of the fence? No pun intended there.
In my opinion, the common sense solution to all of this, the way you come to the middle and the way you push the extremes to the side, is that you sit down with Republicans in the House, and there are enough of them that want to work with Democrats to pass a bill.
Which Democrats?
I mean,
I know it sounds like you would go to that meeting.
All Democrats want to work with Republicans to pass a bill.
Have you been to the Senate? Have you heard Chuck Schumer?
Tell Paul Ryan to put a bill on the floor. We could pass one when we go back.
So that's the House, and when it gets to the Senate, do you have that same?
And it could pass in the Senate. There's no question about that. It's the hardliners on the Republican side that want to close America off and want to shut us off from the rest of the world. And you're already starting to see these trade policies coming to backfire on us with Harley Davidson. I mean, you can't be insular. You cannot be insular.
Harley Davidson made that decision before the president put his policies in play because they were seeing their sales drop in the United States. We'll bring you back another day and we can talk more about this. I have two words for you, though, as you say compromise in the House. Nancy Pelosi. I'm curious to see if she'd go to the same meetings on these issues as you would. I'll bring you back. Congressman Vesey from the great state of Texas, thank you. Well, desperate rescue efforts now are underway in Thailand. Have you been seeing these pictures? A youth soccer team has been found alive 9 days after getting trapped hundreds of yards inside a flooded cave. Now, how do you get them out? The latest on that. President Trump goes on the offensive days before Secretary of State Mike Pompeo heads to North Korea. He's supposed to do that on Thursday. Reports surface that Kim Jong-un may not be planning to get rid of his nuclear program. Alert Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to head to North Korea on this Thursday to talk denuclearization with Kim Jong-un. This amid reports that U.S. intelligence agencies have some serious doubts about Kim Jong-un planning to fully surrender his nuclear program. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts, more now outside the White House. John?
Harris, good afternoon to you. It really was a surprise earlier this week when the White House announced that Pompeo would be going to North Korea on Thursday. We knew that he was going on a trip overseas to Europe, but we didn't know that he was going to be going to North Korea for more talks on North Korea dismantling its nuclear program. As you pointed out at the top, this comes amid new reports that North Korea is upgrading its enrichment facility, its uranium enrichment facility at Yongbyon, as well as making improvements to uranium enrichment facilities in two other locations as well. The White House has been asked directly about that, but refuses to even acknowledge that they have intelligence that shows these improvements. Sarah Sanders spoke about that earlier today. Listen here.
I'm not going to confirm or deny intelligence reports. I'm not going to comment on that. But we had good meetings just a couple days ago with Ambassador Kim. And as you know, Secretary of State's headed to North Korea. And we're continuing to make progress in those conversations. The goal is the same as it's always been, and that's denuclearization. That's what we're going to continue pushing for and continue working with them on.
President Trump again acknowledging this week that the whole deal with North Korea could come tumbling down, but he remains optimistic in a tweet this morning saying, quote, many good conversations with North Korea. It is going well. In the meantime, no rocket launches or nuclear testing in 8 months. All of Asia is thrilled. Only the opposition party, which includes the fake news, is complaining. If not for me, we would now be at war with North Korea. There's been some talk earlier this week, Harris, that the president may meet again with Kim Jong-un, this time in New York City, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly meeting. I'm told that while that is possible, there are no plans being made at this point. But, you know, I think Kim Jong-un got a taste of what's out there when he visited Singapore and went to that now famous casino that's got that image of a boat on top of it. Maybe he wants to see New York City. Who knows?
Yeah, more than an image. That ship is huge downtown Singapore where they went and poured the dom.
When I said image, I meant not a real ship.
I know. Great to see you, John. Thank you very much. Let's bring in Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Great to see you today. Thank you for being on the program. You know, after the summit, the president tweeted that technically, you know, that the nuclear threat was gone from North Korea. With these U.S. intelligence reports, where does that put the actual facts?
It was progress for Kim Jong-un to be signing that document to commit to denuking his nation, but there are multiple steps that are ahead. That was a brief but firm statement that was made. Next, we have to ensure that there is total accounting, that there is complete verification, that there is a total denuclearization of North Korea. And on top of that, in just the days and the weeks that are ahead, we'll see with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo going to North Korea. At times, we're going to have to sit down at the table. We have to look at our adversary in the eye. We have to ask questions. Maybe we have intelligence we want to ask about. And if there's any evidence whatsoever of the North Koreans cheating or going in the wrong direction, we just have to put them on the spot and ask them about it and ensure that this is going in the right direction. But we can't be trusting North Korea that all you do is sign a commitment and then they get to spend the next few months and years ahead hopefully pursuing the right direction. No, instead of that, it's continuing a maximum effort, and it's going to include at times talking to them, confronting them head on, and ensuring that we have a more robust document that gets signed. Remember, the Iran nuclear deal, we didn't even ask for a signature, getting a signed commitment from Kim Jong-un with United States weapons inspectors, and one that ensures complete verification and total denuclearization.
So talk to me about the timing of Secretary of State Pompeo going now to meet with North Korean leadership, because you say you've got to look at potential cheating. Would we see a situation where we would walk away at this point if it looks like those U.S. intel reports are truly the evidence that we need to prove that they are going ahead with their nuclear program?
Absolutely. And that's an important lesson learned. We saw it in real time in the negotiation with the Iran nuclear deal, is that the United States was more desperate for a deal than the Iranians were. There was no reason for us to approach it that way. The Iranians actually needed the sanctions relief more than anyone else. Now, with North Korea, one of the reasons, if not the main reason why the North Koreans are coming to the table is because they've crunched the math, and they may have decided, Kim Jong-un may have decided, that they need to pursue a different path forward for their country, that the status quo doesn't work, not only for their people. I don't know how much Kim Jong-un actually cares about his own people, but even for the regime and the survival of his regime.
Yeah, I mean, the human rights violations in that nation tell us exactly how that regime feels about their people. That we're not in the dark about that. You know, the president plans to meet one-on-one with the Russian President Putin at a summit, we're told, on July 16th. What are the goals of that summit as you see them? You know, you sit on a committee where I would imagine you look at the meddling that they just perpetrated in our presidential election. And we're not going to get into investigations and all that, but the actual meddling that the evidence shows, what should it be the goals at the summit?
You got right at the heart of one of them. Russia meddles. They've meddled here in the United States. They meddle in Afghanistan with the Taliban, where we have forces on the other side. They meddle in Syria. They meddle all over the world. So there needs to be a strong message sent to Vladimir Putin that we have no tolerance for it. We will not accept it, to stay out of our elections. Secondly, I just mentioned Syria. That is something that we need to continue to discuss. Syria is, you could say, a 30-way civil war, and the way that Russia gives backing to Bashar al-Assad really has some very adverse consequences on their own country. It allows Bashar al-Assad to engage in chemical warfare against its own people and have the protection of the Russians, and in some case the Iranians as well. Thirdly, we should understand, in always having a dialogue with Russia, is that the United States and Russia, we have by far the two largest nuclear arsenals in the entire world. So maintaining that dialogue with regards to nuclear weapons, and not just between our two countries, but also efforts with regards to proliferation in other places, such as North Korea.
All right. You mentioned, you know, a tough rebuttal, if you will, or rebuke of Russian meddling, there might be even a call, I would imagine, for some sort of punitive or punishment for them meddling in our election. I don't know what that would look like. I'm sure you're talking about that on your House committee. Representative Zeldin, have a fabulous 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Republican lawmakers have subpoenaed embattled FBI official Peter Strzok. They want him to testify publicly next week. We have a date now. This after he threatened not to show up. Catherine Herridge with new announced to embattled FBI official Peter Strzok has been subpoenaed to testify publicly, and it will happen Tuesday, July 10th. This, as an attorney for Strzok, is now claiming House Republicans are twisting his private testimony and that testifying publicly will be a trap. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live in Washington. So we have a date and a time now, Catherine.
We do. Thank you, Harrison. Good afternoon. The lawyer for FBI agent Peter Strzok is accusing Republicans of twisting and leaking his client's testimony. Strzok testified last week to investigators and some lawmakers on the House Oversight and Judiciary Committee who are running a joint Russia inquiry. Strzok did not answer our questions or any news organizations during his 11 hours on the Hill, with 90 minutes in a classified session. According to the correspondence confirmed by Fox, Strzok's lawyer says he initially expressed an interest in testifying publicly, but it was the House committees that wanted a closed-door session as a first step. Quote, "We know what's in store in the next hearing. They will ask Special Agent Strzok many of the same questions and then seize on any tiny inconsistencies to prove that he perjured himself or made false statements. Given that the committee has proven it is playing political games, violating both our trust and its own rules, it is no longer makes sense for us to keep playing along." Last week, the FBI Director Christopher Wray and the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein got some pretty rough questioning about Strzok, his text messages, and whether political bias infected the Clinton email and Russia investigations.
Just think of the timeline here. You have Peter Strzok. He opens up the counterintelligence investigation against Trump's campaign the end of July. Then a week later, this text message, he ain't going to be president, we'll stop it. Then the next week, the infamous insurance policy text message where he says, we can't take the risk of a Trump presidency, you need an insurance policy. The American people see that. Doesn't that undermine the whole integrity of the actions of people like Peter Strzok?
Yes, Congressman, that obviously is highly inappropriate.
As you mentioned here, is in the last hour, the House Judiciary Committee released this statement confirming that they have issued a subpoena for Agent Strzok to appear publicly on Tuesday next week. We'll see whether we get a response from his lawyer this afternoon, whether they will comply with that request. Harris.
Catherine, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert of the House Judiciary Committee. I'll just start and get your original or first initial thoughts on all of this. I've been watching you on social media all day. I know you have some.
Well, I was there for a number of hours of his testimony previously behind closed doors, and I certainly haven't been the one to leak anything, and I don't know of anybody that has. But it will be interesting. He's been subpoenaed. See if he comes, see if he takes the fifth, what he takes the fifth on. There was, obviously there were a number of things that he didn't testify about, he wouldn't testify about, and I doubt that's going to change a whole lot. But Harris, when you look at the thousands and thousands of texts that gave us great insight on this guy, it's just very clear that he hates those of us on the Republican side of the aisle, especially if you supported Trump against Hillary Clinton. And so you got to take everything that comes out of his mouth with more than a grain of salt, more like a block of salt. It's just, he's not been an honest arbiter of truth and justice. Hasn't.
You know what's interesting? You've got him. He originally said he wanted to talk. Then they point to the leaks. And you say, well, you haven't leaked anything. You don't know anything about that with regard to this. But Peter Strzok is somebody who said in his text messages with his paramour, Lisa Page, when they were at the agency working on several investigations, 2 high-level ones, that they had a plan to keep the president out of the White House.
Right.
What kind of plan could 2 FBI agents on high-level cases have?
Well,
I mean, that's the ultimate question, right?
Well, except that we've seen it play out. It's called the Russia investigation, and there is nobody that's been better at projecting than the Democrats, and especially the Clintons. anything of which they're guilty, they project it onto their opponents. And she is the one that had the ultimate collaboration and colluding with the Russians. And she saw to it that they got the deal to take over a huge amount of U.S. uranium. That should never have been gone through. It would not have gone through if a guy named Rosenstein, Mueller, and Weissman had brought to CFIUS attention just how illegal Russia had been. And so Strzok, this is their plan. They project what the Clintons had done.
Yeah, but it didn't
Trump.
work. It didn't keep this president out of the White House.
No.
And so now we have to look, I would think, from a 37,000-point Gestalt view and say, did one political party turn its weapons on another political party and potentially work through the FBI? Because that's really what matters here. And it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats.
That's right. You're exactly right. And one of the things that astounded me in our hearing last week is that you had people that were really defending what these people had done and what they said they were planning. Whereas, as I had said, you know, if these folks had been around as Republicans during Watergate, Nixon would have finished his term when he had been engaged in wrongdoing, but his party didn't keep defending him. They stood up for what's right. And this is really egregious. It really goes to the core of our being able to function as a republic where people have input in self-government. When we can't trust the Justice Department, then we can't trust the government. It is really foundational in the cracks that have been spread here by Strzok.
I point out that the party is not the issue here, because you have Republicans who are atop the chain over at the DOJ. So, I mean, that's not what it is. Last real quick question for you. So Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern is what we've been told about when we'll hear from Peter Strzok. What do you anticipate that to be like? Because a lot of times these hearings sure do look like bloviating from a lot of the politicians. How focused will it be?
It only looks that way because a lot of times there is some bloviating, but I expect him to come in and say some of the same things he said in his last testimony behind closed doors. I mean, he'd be foolish to say anything different. But there are things that he will not answer, and hopefully we could get some answers. But, Harris, we have so many answers already. You know, when you've got thousands and thousands of statements from somebody over a prolonged period. And by the way, one thing that really struck me, I can't comment on what he said, but he is amazingly good at lying with a straight face.
Wow.
And I thought, how is he so good at this? And I realized he had so much practice with his own wife, you know, lying about his relationship.
You're talking about that extramarital affair now.
Yes, and that's where he got really good at keeping a straight face and not being honest.
We will cover the news on Tuesday as it happens with that FBI agent Peter Strzok. Always good to have you, Congressman Gohmert from the great state of Texas. Always good to be with you, Harris. Thank you. Thank you. A 9-day search for 12 missing boys and their coach. It's over, but now, how do you rescue them from deep inside a partly flooded cave? Why some of those first responders are saying they could be trapped now are underway in Thailand after 12 boys and their soccer coach have been found alive miles inside a partially flooded cave following a 9-day search. The Thai Navy has released the video that you see inside that cave. Greg Palcott is following the story live from London. Greg, this is unbelievable.
Harris, it's an amazing story, hopefully with a happy ending. It all started, as you noted, about 10 days ago. This young soccer team was practicing some of their soccer and then decided to explore a cave. Remember, there's 12 boys aged 11 to 16 and a 25-year-old coach. It all went bad. Heavy rains flooded parts of the cave, trapping them well underground. Thankfully, Monday night, local time, after days of frantic searching by Thai and international teams, rescue workers and divers, including U.S. military from Japan, they were found but about 2.5 miles into a mountainside. They're said to be incredibly in stable condition. They survived drinking water dripping off the side of the cave, but they had no food. They were quickly supplied with a nutrient, both liquid and solid, and also medicine. Some rescue team are with them right now. The challenge challenge, as you noted, Harris, is to get them out. With more rain expected, maybe as early as tomorrow, there is a rush on. They're looking at one way to dive them out. That is to give them specialized protective gear, breathing masks, but that is tricky. Some of these people, some of these little kids, don't even know how to swim, let alone dive, but it still is quicker than in other ways, which could take months, like drilling into the side of the mountain or waiting for the rains to subside. Still, as we speak, they are alive. The families that have been waiting on the side of the cave are very happy right now that their loved ones are ready to come out. But again, the big challenge, getting them out. And that we should hopefully get some better news on that. Hopefully in the next days, maybe a little bit longer. Back to you, Harris.
We'll stay on the story. Miracles happen every day, and I think we may just be seeing another one. Thank you, Greg. Democrats are ramping up their resistance ahead of the midterm elections. President Trump says tactics like those of Congresswoman Maxine Waters will drive people.
I'm Dana Perino. President Trump interviewing several candidates for the Supreme Court this week as we're learning of a new name added to the list. Plus, some liberals telling Senator Chuck Schumer to scrap decorum and civility in battling Trump. Smart move or big mistake? We'll debate. And check out what's called the most viral political ad of 2018 and meet the Texas congressional candidate behind it. That's all next on the Daily Briefing.
Well, Democrats are ramping up their resistance ahead of the midterms. I mentioned that before the break. President Trump is slamming them and predicting that Congresswoman Maxine Waters' tactics will backfire. Here's what he tweeted. Crazy Maxine Waters, said by some to be one of the most corrupt people in politics, is rapidly becoming, together with Nancy Pelosi, the face of the Democrat Party. Her ranting and raving, even referring to herself as a wounded animal, will make people flee the Democrats. Bringing in the power panel now. David Avella, the chairman of GOPAC, back from Outnumbered Hour. Leslie Marshall, a syndicated radio talk show host and Fox News contributor, and you join us on Outnumbered every now and then, too. Let's start with Maxine Waters and where your party is and what the president is predicting.
I think the president's wrong, but I think Maxine Waters is wrong. I don't think that anybody should not be able to, even Bernie Sanders said, you know, you should be able to sit down and have a meal with your family, and I agree. The place to give your opinion, and I wish my fellow Democrats would listen, is not in protesting, is not yelling at people in restaurants, but is voting. And in the midterms, historically, Democrats don't show up in those numbers. But I don't think that Maxine Waters and that Nancy Pelosi are the new face of the Democratic Party. They're faces that are part of the old party, and we're certainly, with recent elections or primaries,
time for that party to go?
I'm not saying
old face.
I think that we're in a transformational stage of bringing in some new and keeping on some olds, but eventually the olders will be phased
Leslie
out.
is so diplomatic. That's one of the things I love about it. So, David, you know what? Traditionally, people don't come out to vote from either party, actually, in the midterm elections. But there is electricity and intensity on your side of the aisle. What's driving it?
The agenda that the president's ultimately getting passed through Congress, whether it be tax cuts that has helped spur this job creation that has 1 million more jobs right now than available people to fill those jobs. It is that America has been kept safe during the Trump administration, all focused on what I always talk about. When Republicans focus on people's economic and personal security, Republicans win. And to your first point about the Democrats, the last two times the Democrats have preached civil chaos, 1968, not good elections for them. 2004, not good elections for them. Richard Nixon won in 1968. George Bush won in 2004. Add to that, when voters actually saw what Democrats were for in 2010, who did they turn to? They turned to Republicans. And so the more Democrats reveal who they really are and what they're really for, it motivates people to go vote Republican.
So Leslie, what's being revealed about Democrats, do you think? I mean, your party is going far left. You've got the abolishing ICE call that started with a candidate who is, well, describes herself as a democratic socialist. I mean, is that where your party is going?
No, I see the party going there in some areas, like the Bronx, for example, but I think not in the Bronx, Iowa, for example. There are people that are to the far left, and that would be the former Bernie campers. There are people like Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, who have said that they want to have ICE abolished. But then there are people like Amy Klobuchar that I agree with that say that isn't the problem. It's policy that's the problem. It's the administration that's the problem. You can change policy, and you can vote to change individuals and administrations.
Is resistance enough? Resist the
No,
president.
resistance is not enough. You have to have a game plan. But I disagree with you strongly. I think if we're looking at exit polls in these primaries especially, we're seeing that voters are really concerned about health care more than we thought. Democrats didn't think they'd be talking about health care as much. They're concerned about immigration. And I think depending on what happens with the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade may become an issue.
You've got 8 seconds.
Immigration and health care are both important, both issues that favor Republicans, because Democrats ultimately want a government-run health care system. People want a secure border. Things Republicans are pushing for favors us.
You do a lot with 8 seconds.
Yeah.
David Vella, Leslie Marshall, great.